There's a settlement quota of people who are, as you can see from Sri Lankans, there's a fair proportion of people who settle in New South Wales, in Victoria, a large community, and also in Queensland, although maybe they'll wash down into New South Wales and Victoria after the recent floods. The Sri Lankan population, as you can see, that census in 2006 shows that there are at least 62,000 Sri Lankan-born people in Australia, and that is obviously increasing as time goes on. There's just a general split as to how it's divided up over these states. This might be important for you when you consider which state you want to go to. As you can see that Victoria has 50% of the Sri Lankan population that moves to Australia. I thought this was an interesting comparison about people from Sri Lanka who go to Australia. Now that little graph in the green represents the population in general. The graph in blue represents the Sri Lankan population. And as you can see, Sri Lankans are well above the national average when it comes to qualifications in degrees and diplomas. They're quite close to it in certificates, and in the no qualifications, they're about at the national level. So that tells me a couple of things, and one of them is that people going to Australia from Sri Lanka are educated, very educated, and mostly at bachelor degree or an advanced diploma level. It also tells us that when we're looking at the occupations of Sri Lankans in Australia compared to the national average, a large proportion of Sri Lankans are managers. There are also a large proportion who are professionals. Not so many are tradespeople, but there are many people in the clerical and sales industry, and also about the national average in relation to labourers. So that tells me that when people from Sri Lanka are going to go to Australia, that generally they're going to be employable. So in the 2010 census, our national unemployment rate was about 5%. I mentioned before that in Western Australia, our employment rate is down to unemployment rate down to 4.2%. So Sri Lankans, the national unemployment rate for Sri Lankans was quite low. The formal qualification rate was very high against the national rate. And it also shows that 81.6% of all Sri Lankans take out Australian citizenship as soon as they possibly can, compared to the national rate of 75%. So of all people who migrate to Australia, Sri Lanka has an extremely high rate of people who take out citizenship when that becomes eligible for them. Australia does support dual nationality, so there is absolutely no requirement that you give up your Sri Lankan citizenship, and you are able to then travel on a Sri Lankan passport or an Australian passport. There's no distinction. So I want to talk about a couple of the states. It's almost impossible for me to go and talk about every state in Australia. Once we've done a couple of states, then we're going to talk a little bit about migration and how we might help you qualify to migrate. So Perth has about the population of Colombo. I'm not sure what the geographic area of Colombo is. Does anybody have an idea? A couple hundred square kilometres? What would it be? 40 by 40 kilometres? Yeah? The metropolitan area of Colombo. So that means Colombo's got an area of about 1,600 square kilometres, and there's 2 million people who live in that 1,600 square kilometres. So Western Australia has a population of 2.2 million, and about 1.8 million live in the metropolitan area. So Perth has a population of 5,000, a square meterage of 5,000 square kilometres, in which we fit in 1.8 million people. So I talked before about the size of the country. We've got 2 million people in Colombo in 1,600 square kilometres. In Perth, we've got 1.8 million people spread over 5,000 square kilometres. So that's quite a difference. Our capital city is Perth. Our unemployment rate, I haven't changed that slide, that's incorrect. That is 4.2%. Housing, you can buy housing in Perth for $350,000. So you just need to add a couple of zeros to convert it to Sri Lankan money. And the average salary around 50,000 Australian dollars. So there's a picture of our city. Quite a small city, not lots of high-rise like Melbourne and Sydney. It's quite flat, and because of the area we have, it's spread out greatly. That's our Swan River, which leads down to Fremantle and to the Indian Ocean. Of course, you guys are on the other side of the Indian Ocean. This is Perth, taken from Kings Park, which Kings Park is like a national treasure, or a state treasure for us. We go up there just to walk around and look at the fantastic view down to the city and to the river. And every Australia Day, which is coming up on the 26th of January, there's a huge fireworks display, and there's probably 300,000 or 400,000 people gather on the banks, all around the banks of the river, up in Kings Park to watch the fireworks display. It's a whole day affair. South Australia is in the middle, and that's slightly smaller than Western Australia. Its population is 1.1 million. It's slightly cheaper in South Australia, and I have to tell you that South Australia is offering some really good sponsorship options, and some of you may wish to take up those options if it's been relevant for you. There is the capital city of Adelaide. Most of our cities are based on a river. That's obviously not Adelaide. That's just part of the coast, heading around towards Victoria. And Victoria is quite a large city, a large state. It has a population in the city of around 4 million. Unemployment rate's slightly higher, and because of the demand on housing, then the prices are slightly higher in Victoria. Doesn't have a lot of resources. It does have oil and gas. But in general, Victoria is the manufacturing state. Western Australia has very little manufacturing whatsoever. We dig stuff up and send it overseas. Iron ore, gold, aluminium, you name it. Melbourne is a very, very a good place to go to. Lovely river. They've spent millions and millions of dollars tidying the place up. This is at the Crown Casino. And when you happen to be sitting at the Crown Casino at the little restaurants which dot along there, the river there, all of a sudden those big gas lights light up and shoot a big flame into the air. And if you're not used to it, it's a bit of a scary exercise. And I was sitting there having some dinner with Hiroshi, who's your brother or mother-in-law, one night, and Hiroshi's used to it, and sitting there having some Thai food, and all of a sudden this whoosh! I went, what the heck is that? And these things go up every hour. They have this massive shoot of flame going in the air. It's quite a spectacular thing to see. In Australia, the cost of living, rents are generally in the region of $330 per week. Food, about $300 a week. That's going to vary how much you eat. I was telling someone the other day that my wife and I didn't think we spent a lot of money on food, but then I realised, looked at my Visa card statement, it's got all this stuff on it. I think, how do we eat so much of this food? And I realised my kids come over with their kids and they eat it out of house and home. So I can see their food bill is very, very small. Mine is up here somewhere. But food in general is plentiful, very fresh, not super expensive. I'm happy to come here and went into the shop and bought a packet of cereal. Now, I didn't really understand the money at that point. I didn't really realise how much cereal was. A box of muesli, which cost me about $2 in Perth, cost me 1,800 rupees. That's $18 Aussie. $18. I could have my teeth filled with gold for that. It was just crazy. I couldn't believe it. So anyway, I'm not buying muesli in Colombo anymore. Interest rates on housing about 7%. Visa and MasterCard, which many people have, typically 19%. And there's a little bit of information about the cost of petrol and how much you buy a car. I'm hoping you all know what a Hyundai Getz is. It's one of those little cars about the size of the Tata. Who knows? Now, in Australia, government schools are